Welcome to today's edition of the IntoTexas AI podcast. It's your look at AI news and trends impacting Texas. I'm your host, Shannon Belew. Let's get started. This week, a major cybersecurity breach involving the widely used learning platform Canvas sent shockwaves through higher education. Reports indicate that hackers may have accessed nearly 4 terabytes of data connected to schools and universities across the country, including institutions here in Texas. But this story may be about much more than cybersecurity, because in the AI era, universities are quickly becoming something else entirely when it comes to data and AI. They are truly a massive data platform. So today we're going to look beyond simply how this breach happened and instead ask what happens when educational institutions become some of the largest repositories of AI era behavioral data before they are fully prepared to protect it potentially. So today on IntoTexas AI, we take a closer look at the Canvas cyberattack, what 4 terabytes of student data actually represents, and why Texas universities may now sit at the center of a rapidly expanding collision between AI, education, cybersecurity, and data economics. Let's talk about why this breach matters. So Canvas, if you're not familiar with it, it's one of the most widely used digital learning systems in higher education in particular. For millions of students, it's where assignments are submitted, discussions happen, grades are stored, feedback is exchanged, and of course where coursework often lives. And increasingly, it could also be considered where AI-enhanced education is beginning to take shape. According to multiple reports, the hacking group that's taken responsibility for the attack has claimed access to data tied to thousands of educational institutions and hundreds of millions of records globally. Several Texas universities and educational systems were reportedly impacted or are investigating exposure, including the University of Texas system, Texas A&M, University of Houston, Baylor, and many others, including some smaller colleges across the state. So the sheer scale of this breach is truly staggering. Again, nearly 4 terabytes of data. And when most people hear 4 terabytes, it sounds technical, maybe even a little bit abstract. So let's translate that into what it could actually mean. 4 terabytes can represent millions of documents, years of student coursework, discussion histories, academic records, communication patterns, behavioral data, login activity, digital learning interactions, and even potentially financial records. Now, I think that's where we need to take a little closer look at how deeply connected this becomes to artificial intelligence. Because in the AI economy, data is no longer about passive storage. Data is fuel. So student data is becoming AI training fuel. Now, first, it's really important to state that according to Instructure, that's the parent company of Canvas, they have been updating on their website, as quickly as they can, information about the attack, what it means, what they're doing to protect them in future attacks, and so forth. So a lot of the data I'll be sharing today when we talk about this does come directly from Instructure, and they have confirmed that the data compromised in the attack includes some personal information of users at all the affected organizations. And this essentially equates to, according to them, names, email addresses, student ID numbers, and messages or chats among and between Canvas users. So the company has said that so far no additional data was retrieved, and that does include financial information, passwords, dates of birth, other forms of government identification. But I do think this is a good time to consider what other types of data could become valuable. I think this is a good time to evaluate and consider what other types of data could become valuable in the AI era. Because historically, universities have viewed platforms like Canvas as administrative tools, digital filing cabinets for education, And I think that AI changes the value of that information potentially dramatically. Modern AI systems thrive on large collections of human writing, communication, collaboration, feedback loops, decision making patterns, and behavioral interactions. And so universities now contain enormous volumes of exactly that kind of data. So think about what exists inside these modern learning systems. You've got essays, you've got writing samples, peer discussions, project collaboration, instructor feedback, research interactions, and learning analytics, and also, very importantly, performance patterns. So that's not only educational information anymore or personal data anymore. It's structural human behavioral data. And that structured behavioral data is becoming one of the most valuable assets in the AI economy. Now, I also want to emphasize that there's currently no evidence that this Canvas breach involved AI model training directly or indirectly, and it's certainly too early to understand if AI was even used in any way by the hackers to enable the attack. The most recent information, again from Instructure, the parent company, states that the vulnerability leading to the attack was actually rooted in some of its free accounts at Canvas. As of May 8th, the company has said, this is a quote, "We identified the issue related to free for teacher accounts and temporarily shut down those accounts. We also revoked privileged credentials and access tokens, deployed platform-wide protections, rotated certain pathways, and added monitoring across all of their platforms." And the company describes additional steps that it's also that's taking to prevent future attacks. Again, a quote from the company: "Beyond the immediate response, we're hardening administrative access, token management, permissions, monitoring, and related workflows. The investigation may inform further improvements." End quote. So these are expected and much needed steps. It's all the right things to do. But the broader reality is impossible to ignore. The more that AI systems become dependent on large scale human interaction data, the more valuable these educational data sets become. So when we think about, what hackers typically steal, it's passwords, it's government identifiers like social security numbers, it's credit card numbers, things that can be sold for immediate financial gain. Or it's about holding information hostage for a ransom, as seems to be the case in this particular attack. But I don't think we've really thought enough about what else may become valuable as we talk about AI. And in many ways, universities now possess something incredibly rare, and that's massive longitudinal data sets that capture how humans learn, how they communicate, write, solve problems, and interact over time. That has enormous value to researchers, to technology companies, and unfortunately, potentially one day to cyber criminals. So let's talk about Texas a bit. As we know, the state is rapidly positioning itself as a national AI leader. And we've talked a good bit on this podcast about AI focused schools across the state. Data center expansion has been and continues to be a huge topic. Semiconductor investments, workforce development, and just general enterprise AI adoption. Cloud infrastructure growth is certainly another topic that we cover a good bit that's important in Texas. But I think we need to also realize that universities are increasingly becoming more and more of that AI infrastructure story as well. Texas universities are no longer just educational institutions, right? They are becoming these AI research hubs, cloud connected enterprises, cybersecurity targets, and GPU compute environments. They're innovation pipelines, and they're certainly workforce training engines. So that means that higher education institutions now carry many of the same risks as major corporations. Also, consider that universities are often thought of as open environments. So they may often have thousands of users, decentralized technology systems, rotating student populations, lots of third-party software integrations, and certainly collaborative research structures. and all with broad digital access requirements. So that openness certainly fuels innovation, but it also creates vulnerability, as we know. And as AI adoption accelerates across education, the attack surface grows alongside it. And AI is changing cybersecurity itself, I think. So, another major part of this story is how is AI reshaping cyber attacks, or how could it potentially reshape future cyber attacks? Today's cyber criminals increasingly do use AI to automate phishing attacks, to create convincing impersonation emails, scale social engineering campaigns, improve malware development. And they use it to help analyze these vulnerabilities faster. They also use it in voice enabled communications that are really making people vulnerable. So if you think about it, AI is lowering the cost of cybercrime, if you will, while increasing the sophistication of it. And universities are particularly attractive to targets because they typically contain a good bit of financial data, identity information, research data, intellectual property, healthcare records, and now increasingly valuable behavioral data sets. So, in other words, the same institutions helping prepare students for the AI economy may also be facing a new generation of AI enhanced cyber threats because universities are truly under enormous pressure to move faster with AI adoption. But governance and cybersecurity maturity may not be scaling at the same speed. Now, here's the good news for Texas in particular, I think. The state is also home, as we know, to a growing ecosystem of not just AI companies in general, but to cybersecurity focused companies. And these AI firms are working on a lot of these same challenges that we're talking about today. In Austin, for example, you have companies like CrowdStrike. They've become national leaders in AI driven threat detection and behavioral cybersecurity analysis. Then you've got some Dallas based companies as well, like Critical Start. They're building AI assisted security operations and managed threat response platforms. Then you have firms like Zimperium, who focus heavily on AI powered mobile threat protection, which is increasingly important as education becomes more device centric. And Texas has also produced enterprise AI companies like Spark Cognition that helped pioneer anomaly detection and predictive AI systems long before the current AI boom even accelerated. So Texas isn't just facing the cybersecurity challenge, it's also building part of the response infrastructure that's so critical. But the challenge moving forward may truly be in speed of all of this. So, can institutions adapt governance, cybersecurity, and data protection fast enough to match the pace of AI adoption and how cybersecurities are advancing using AI? So, this may become one of the defining questions as we look toward the future. You know, the Canvas breach, it truly is about cybersecurity, hackers, and it's going to likely be remembered as just another cybersecurity incident. But it also may become an early warning, a warning that perhaps educational institutions have entered the AI economy, whether they fully have realized it or not. And once universities become large scale AI era data platforms, the stakes change drastically. Student data is no longer just academic information, it becomes economic infrastructure, it becomes strategic infrastructure, and increasingly it becomes AI fuel. So, for Texas, a state aggressively expanding its role in AI innovation, education, infrastructure, and workforce development, and that creates both tremendous opportunity and enormous responsibility. The future of the AI economy won't just be built inside tech companies. It's also going to be shaped inside of these classrooms, universities, and educational systems, and particularly those across the state of Texas. So the question is whether those systems are ready for what comes next. And that's it for today's episode of the IntoTexas AI podcast. I hope we've given you something new to think about when you consider cybersecurity in the new world of AI. And if you want future insights on how AI is reshaping all of these topics along and across the state of Texas, then I invite you to continue listening, sharing, and of course, subscribing. Thank you. I'm Shannon Belew, and I'll see you next time.